Welcome back to Old School Sports, and appreciate you taking the time to indulge me and listen to the announcement of the team that we're going to be playing in our long play series here in OOTP 26. It's not actually the San Francisco Giants. Those of you who watched my last video will know that the Giants are the team that I pulled up when I walked through the settings that I'll be using in OOTP 26. But they are not the direction that I'm going to go this year. This will be a long run for us in terms of having pretty long playthroughs, hopefully, in OOTP. 3 years ago, when we ended up playing with the Kansas City Royals, I knew for some time that that was the direction that I was likely to go. We did go off into a different direction in that series, and after some success with Kansas City, moved on to a couple of other struggling franchises with the Pittsburgh Pirates and the Colorado Rockies in what was a fun playthrough. 2 years ago, I 100% knew months before the new version of OOTP was released that I was going to try to do a somewhat realistic expansion team with the Buffalo Wings in Buffalo, New York. And even last year, when we ended up with the Oakland A's, that was kind of the direction in my mind that I ultimately settled on. There were times when I thought the White Sox and the Angels might be the way to go a year ago, but really felt like the A's were the biggest challenge out there. But here in 2025, I have been all over the map as to what to do. Several of you have asked me about this in the comments over the past few months. And I did note that we weren't necessarily going to go with a team that was in the 10 challenging teams to consider in OOTP video that we put out every year that we updated a couple of months ago. And honestly, when OOTP 26 came out 2 months ago, I had absolutely no idea what team I was going to play. That persisted for about a month, and about a month ago I made a decision, and it was not a team that was on that list of 10 challenging teams to consider. Gotten a number of interesting ideas from viewers over the year. Try a historical replay, build a world of my own, do another expansion team, try a team that's more in the middle of the standings rather than a pure rebuild. And hopefully there will be time over the years to get to all of those things and many more. But while I had settled on a team that kind of meets some of those criteria, a couple of weeks ago I started having some second thoughts. And ultimately over these last 2 weeks I have been going back and forth pretty dramatically and pretty volatilely with the two teams that it ultimately came down to the final decision. And both of those teams were on the list of 10 challenging teams to consider. I don't think it's going to be a shock when I announce the two teams and go through them and then let you know my ultimate decision. It ultimately came down over this past week and a half or so to me between the Chicago White Sox, who, of course, last season were a team that I almost played with and ended up having the worst season in the majors of any team in my lifetime, and are one of the historically worst teams in Major League history from back in 2024. And then the other team that I'm strongly considering is the Colorado Rockies, who this year, with a brutal start, are trying to say hold my beer to the Chicago White Sox as far as having an historically awful season. So the last couple of weeks I've been going back and forth with the White Sox and the Rockies as the way to go. I'll walk through both of those rosters quickly here and the organizations, and then let you know the decision. And then the next time you'll be hearing from me, it's early Friday morning the 16th as I'm working on this video. Will hopefully be later this evening with the start of the new series. When we take looks at the rosters of the White Sox and the Rockies, not surprisingly, both of these teams are total dumpster fires. You can see the White Sox pitching staff. There's not even a single player with a 50 overall or potential rating. Lineups a little bit of potential here with guys like Caro, Robert Jr., Kyle Teel, Chase Maydroth. There is a little bit of young talent in the organization at the major league level, but not necessarily talent that you think are really going to be huge game changers when all is said and done. Can say a similar thing about the Rockies. Goodman, Tovar, Zach Veen, young players that have some potential. Pitching staff for the Rockies, a couple of guys that we think can kind of be average-ish major league pitchers, but there's also some guys on this staff that are just total disasters. Taking a look at the salary obligations, neither team is in a good spot. Not a lot of talent on the teams, as we talked about. Feel like the Rockies may be a little worse in terms of the salaries just because Chris Bryant is injured now with a degenerative disc disease, fragile physically, and at best an average-ish major league bat, and probably not even that at this point. And Kyle Freeland is also signed for several years. His stuff is well above average, movement below average, and he's been pretty brutal this year. Not cripplingly long-term commitments at this point, but those two and Ryan McMahon are signed for the next 3 to 4 seasons. Potentially similar with Senzatella, although presumably is a 30-year-old whose stuff is down to a 30, which is just sickly. We would not be exercising that team option for him in the 3rd year. The White Sox also have a couple of longer obligations with Benintendi and Robert Jr., but they're generally a little younger, a little less money. And with Robert Jr., you've got a team option for that 3rd year. And he's still likely an overpaid, but still a useful major league player. Good fielder, good speed, some home run pop in the bat. So I think when we look at the rosters, these teams are pretty even. The salary obligations for both teams are not great, but I honestly think that the Rockies are in a bit worse of a position. Getting into some of the front office things, the finances, both teams have money available simply because they're not spending any money on player payroll. So an opportunity to clean house and pay out some coaches and rebuild the coaching staff is definitely there with the White Sox, who've got $42 million available. Good market size, below average fan loyalty, and the fan interest, not surprisingly, is brutal right now. Turning to the financial overview of the Rockies, similar as far as their budget. Their payroll is higher, so they don't have as much money available, but still certainly enough to make widespread changes to the coaching staff if we'd like. Market size is a little bit lower. Fan loyalty is a little bit lower, although fan interest is actually somewhat higher for the Rockies. So a similar financial situation with both of these teams. All being said, maybe favor the White Sox a little bit, but neither situation is great. Ownership, I think the Rockies are in a tougher spot. Normal involvement and balanced priority from Charlie Monfort, but demanding patience and a controlling fiscal personality are not great things to have, particularly with a pretty low budget and a poor roster. You can see that he wants the team to play close to 500 ball this year when they've got a 163 winning percentage, and they haven't had a 500 record since 2018. And at 65 years old, he's likely to be the owner for several years, possibly even a couple of decades. The White Sox, similar involvement and priority from Jerry Reinsdorf, but tolerant in terms of his patience, charitable in his fiscal personality. So definitely a better owner to be dealing with over the near term. The issue with Reinsdorf is that he's 89 years old, so he will likely not be the owner for the long term, and he'll be needing to integrate a new owner and deal with the uncertainty of what their personality might look like down the line. So neither position is really great. Probably favor the White Sox here too, just because Reinsdorf's personality is easier for the near term, and then you roll the dice and see what happens when a new owner comes in. Player development is a strong vote in favor of the White Sox being a better situation. Hagen Smith, Noah Schultz, and Kyle Teal are all currently viewed as top 20 prospects, and the organization ranks second in this universe. All these rankings will be likely slightly different when we start over the new universe with the team that we decide to play with. Colorado, near the back of the pack, ranking 24th overall, and just one top 100 prospect in Charlie Condon, who does look like he could have a very interesting bat down the line. Doesn't necessarily have a great position to play, but at 6'6" with mediocre infield ratings, definitely seems like a guy who could handle first base pretty well down the line for the Rockies. But looking at these two farm systems, certainly would argue that the White Sox, with starting pitching prospect Hagen Smith, starting pitching prospect Noah Schultz, and the catcher Kyle Teal, who's up with the big club already, have more high-end talent. Little bit of a different situation, at least this year, for the draft. The Rockies will be picking 4th overall in the first round, while the White Sox won't pick till 10th overall, so that's certainly a material advantage for the Rockies. Going forward in the draft, though, in the subsequent rounds, it'll be based on their records from last year, with the White Sox picking first and the Rockies picking second. So the farm system right now favors the White Sox, but what you're going to be able to do in this first draft favors the Rockies, and certainly looking at the fact that the Rockies are very likely to have the most ping-pong balls in the draft lottery next year. As far as securing the first position or a very high position, would put them slightly ahead in terms of the draft situation. A couple other factors that I've thought about while thinking about this: the division that these teams play in the AL Central. A lot of pretty mediocre payrolls for the teams. The Tigers rank 20th in terms of their payroll. Cleveland Guardians are 21st. The Minnesota Twins rank 19th. And then who the heck is the other team we're looking for here? The Kansas City Royals, of course, rank 24th. So not a lot of real highly capitalized and highly budgeted competition that the White Sox will be facing off against. Very different situation for the Colorado Rockies. The Diamondbacks, a middle-of-the-pack team in terms of their payroll. Giants, a middle-of-the-pack team this year, but they are in a big market. And then some pretty big spenders with the Padres ranking 9th, and very good market dynamics at this point. And then, of course, the Los Angeles Dodgers with the largest budget, largest payroll, and just absolutely incredible financial resources. So when we look at the competition that we are likely to be facing, have to say, in my mind, the White Sox situation is easier than the Rockies situation. Looked at the ballparks. Rate field is very neutral as far as batting averages. Doesn't generate a ton of extra base hits in the field of play, but a very good home run ballpark. And of course, if you follow baseball, you know what's going on with the hitting environment in Coors Field in Colorado for the Rockies. Huge batting averages, tons of extra base hits, and lots of home runs. Righties have the advantage as far as home runs over lefties, but the batting average favors lefties a little bit over righties. But it's going to be a situation where it's pretty difficult to have pitchers put up consistently good numbers. If you play with the Rockies, and as I noted earlier, I did play with them 3 years ago. I think it was in the 2040s by the time I got into the Rockies, and played with them for several seasons. Obviously a very different situation than what they look like here in real life 2025. But would need to focus on trying to get as many ground ball pitchers into the organization as possible, and hope that you could convince some free agents to come over. One final factor that did influence my decision making, that was a wild card in favor for the Chicago White Sox. As I've been thinking about making this decision, we get the first American Pope in history, and he happens to be from Chicago, and he happens to be a White Sox fan, and he was at the World Series 20 years ago when the White Sox were at the World Series. So I felt like perhaps that was a bit of divine intervention, suggesting to me that the White Sox might be the way to go here in OOTP 26. So as I noted, I've gone back and forth over the last week and a half or so pretty dramatically between the White Sox and the Rockies as to which team to play. We've walked through some of the things that I've thought about. I think on the margins, I think the Rockies are a bit more challenging for some of the reasons that I've talked about. But I think either team is going to be a pretty good challenge, as they're both in very bad spots. In fact, as we sit here on May 16th, they're in the two worst spots in baseball as far as their winning percentage, which is exactly where they were a year ago, only in a different order this year. So on the margin, the Rockies, I think, are a bit more of a challenge. But as I talked about, felt like with the White Sox, was it a sign that we've got a Pope from Chicago who's a fan of the White Sox, and should I be doing that? I came up over the past 2 weeks when I had decided at various times that the White Sox were going to be the team and the Rockies were going to be a team, with thumbnails for both. You'll remember if you watched my series last year with the Oakland A's, it was Can We Save the A's? Used a little bit of alliteration with both of the prospective series that I was talking about. With the new Pope, my title for the White Sox would be Salvation for the Sox. And with the Rockies, my title for a Colorado Rockies series would be Rescue the Rockies. And ultimately, what we're going to do here in OOTP 26 is try to rescue those Colorado Rockies. I think, as I said, it's the worst situation out there for a lot of reasons. I can't say it's exponentially worse than the White Sox or the A's or the Pirates or some of the other teams around that are in a real difficult position. But you've got some bad contracts. You've got a little less financial freedom right now than you do with the White Sox. You've got more difficult ownership that's probably going to be around for a while. You've got a minor league system that's pretty barren, and you've got a challenging home field to build around. And you've also got arguably the most highly resourced division rivals in aggregate of any team out there. So because of that, we're going to be taking our talents to Colorado at the start of our new series in OOTP 26. And as I noted, hopefully later on today, Friday, March 16th, we will have the first episode of that series out there. Probably not going to be a ton of action. I think the big thing that I'm going to be working on is trying to change a lot of the personnel here on the Rockies. I haven't spent any time going through the coaches, but I'm guessing there will be plenty of them around that are not that great. Right here, Dan Meyer, their AA coach, average at teaching pitching, but only fair with development and poor with mechanics. Probably someone I'd move on from. Actually, Travis Burmeister doesn't look horrible as a hitting coach. Greg Jones, I'd probably like to improve. Average hitting, fair development, okay with mechanics. As I noted, not as much money available, but still plenty to suck it up right now, buy out some personnel who have longer-term contracts, although it doesn't look like there's any crazy contracts with the Rockies. Haven't actually looked at their trainer and scouting director. We'll do a quick look at those. Trainer is actually reasonably respectable with rehab, good with fatigue recovery. I don't love that he's only okay in preventing arm, back, and other injuries. Keith Duggar at 64, also probably going to be looking to retire in the not-too-distant future, only signed for 3 years, so might be a guy to just move on from. Scouting director Danny Montgomery favors tools, excellent with amateurs, average at everything else. I think there might be a better opportunity out there, although he's certainly not bad. So those are the types of things that I'll be tackling offline before I even get into the next episode. As I said, I'm not anticipating that it's going to be a particularly active year. If we can possibly trade away one or two of the guys with those bad contracts, I'll do it. I'm guessing we'll have to keep a huge piece of those contracts to make anything happen, but particularly with the most expensive guys on that list in the form of Bryant and Freeland particularly, I just don't think they add a ton of value. So even if we have to keep 80% of those contracts, might just make sense to do what we can to move on from them. But I'm also not anticipating that anyone's going to be that eager to take them on, even if they're only paying 20% of the contracts. But we will cross those bridges in the coming episodes. Hope you're looking forward to the new series. Hope you at least understand what my rationale was, even if you don't agree with it. I know there's tons of different perspectives on this, but hopefully many of you will be around the ride and the journey with us for the next, hopefully 8, 9, 10 months, hopefully a couple hundred episodes as we explore whether or not we can rescue the Rockies. Until our first episode in the series, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.